Hey, Rod, are you with us? I don't see
Buddy,
Rod.
welcome to the Recovery Hour. Can you hear me here, Rand?
Yeah, I got you now. Okay.
Okay, excellent. Well, I apologize. We have a little bit of a different setup than we're used to here. I
Yeah,
believe it's episode number 28 of the Recovery Hour, and I'm
there you
coming
are.
to you from beautiful Calgary, Alberta here tonight. And I should have set up my usual sports talk show setup. I thought that I would give this a try. How are we sounding here, Rand, as we're right out of the gate?
You sound good and you look good. It looks like you survived
Okay,
your
good.
Super Bowl experience, or pre-Super
Yeah, we
Bowl
can get
anyway.
into that. Yeah, we can get we get into all of that later on if you want.
Yeah.
I'm excited for the program tonight, obviously, because our good mutual friend Bob Merrier is going to be joining us, a celebrity sober coach. I've already heard from him. He's very excited to come on, and he's ready to come on. Ran from
Perfect.
South Florida, but I guess the topic tonight is interventions, and Bob is a celebrity interventionist and sober coach. You and I do interventions as well. It's an interesting part of this industry. Are we going to welcome the special guest that you've got in studio right off the top?
Sure. So last month we did a little bit on the Sober January thing, and we have with us Laura. Hi, Laura.
Hi, Ron.
How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Good. And so I wanted to get somebody who was in the middle of this process, because when we talked to Mike, it had been a couple of years, and he was continuing to be alcohol free, and so I'm around lots of teachers all the time, and Laura works at one of the schools that I work at, and she was just asking me before we started, why did I pick her? And so I said, well, I don't hang around the staff rooms very often, but on a few trips through there, I heard wine discussions, and she was frequently in the middle of these. And at the same time, I know that Laura is highly competent and a good mom and a good teacher. So I asked her if she'd be interested in doing the Dry February thing, and she looked at me, and it took her about half a second, and she said, sure. So, Laura, uh, how did you feel about that when I asked you?
Well, I mean, I am a competitive person, so I was
Yeah.
like, I'm going to do it, of course.
Okay.
But I would say I did get a little bit of a pit in my stomach, just a little bit of nerves with it.
And what do you think that had to do with?
I think more so the reaction from the people around me. I think having to explain to people why you're not drinking. I think that made me nervous. I had no. I mean, I know I can do it.
Yeah.
I've had 3 children and been sober for all throughout my pregnancies.
Yeah.
But I think more just explaining why I'm not drinking.
Well, that's a really interesting piece, because alcohol has become so socially important to lots of people that when you say you don't drink or you're not drinking, people wonder, like, why not?
Yeah.
So, who did you tell?
I actually didn't tell very many people. I did
Because of that?
Yeah, I think so. I didn't tell. I told a couple of my girlfriends,
Yeah.
and a reaction right away is, "Well, why?" And I actually didn't tell them that you asked me not to. It was just more of a. I felt like I had to explain for personal reasons, my physical health, my mental health, and I had actually been hearing a lot about the connection to cancer, especially with women.
Yeah. I mean, it's a huge issue in breast cancer.
Yeah. But it was just like I just, feel like I need to take a break and
So we're 2 weeks into, two
Yeah.
weeks-ish into
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Have you noticed that you're not drinking, and what kinds of feelings are you having around that? I don't know what your patterns were like.
Patterns probably like holidays for sure.
Mhm.
Gatherings, getting together. Summertime, definitely being out at the cabin in the warm weather. Definitely more drinking then. When I'm working, though, I typically don't drink during the week,
Mhm.
but usually coming home on that Friday, looking forward to having a drink with my husband and just kind of taking a breath and decompressing.
So how did those first couple of Fridays go?
Well, the first Friday was actually okay because I was on my way, I think, to a hockey tournament, and it was no big deal. But one weekend we had some people. We have a big hockey rink in our backyard, and we invited a whole bunch of people over. And I didn't tell anybody that I wasn't drinking because we were all around a fire.
Mm-hmm.
But I had a mug that just had some tea in it. And I mean, I didn't really feel out of place because we weren't in an openly public area and people were well worried about the kids
Yeah.
skating.
So you're kind of hiding the fact
Yeah.
that you weren't drinking.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. And nobody asked me if I
No.
was, but I wasn't open about it to say, oh, I'm
Yeah.
not drinking, it's dry February. I think also too, because it maybe makes other people uncomfortable.
Why do you think that's true?
I think because I think it gives them a perspective, an inward look that maybe they can't do it or they don't want to do it or they don't want to have to explain to people either.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it kind of puts your conscience on blast, if you will. I think a little bit.
So other than hiding it, did you miss it?
Honestly, I think in the moment maybe a little bit, but when I went to bed, no.
Yeah. And the next morning.
And the
is
next
all-
morning, no.
Yeah.
And I find that as I've been getting older, my body's reacting differently before I go to bed with alcohol, and I've been sleeping solid and waking up on the weekend. You know, it's not kind of that if I've had one too many that it's not.
Well, it's very disruptive for sleep, which most people don't realize
Yeah.
either.
I think a lot of people think it helps them go to sleep, not
Well,
realizing.
it's good at initiating sleep,
Yeah.
but then you wake up 2 or 3 times during the night
Yeah.
because everything's changing in your brain.
Yeah.
And are you noticing anything else about the experience of not drinking intentionally?
I don't really miss it.
Mhm.
I'm not craving anything. Like it's not. I don't think about it. I think in the beginning when it's in your brain that you're not supposed to do something, it becomes
Yeah.
something you think about all the time. But I'm not thinking about it really. Nothing really extraordinary. I think Super Bowl on Sunday. It would have been nice to have a beer with my husband while we were watching. But then again, it's all related to that social pattern, right?
Yeah.
That social being.
And did you have a Valentine's Day event or anything?
No.
No. Okay. Well, you got kids. so
Yeah,
that-
yeah, that's right.
That
My
complicates
children.
life. Complicates life quite a bit.
Yeah.
So, what do you think this will do for you in terms of longer-term relationship with alcohol?
Oh, that's a good question. I think just makes me more aware of the setting that I choose to engage in drinking, the social aspect of it that I don't necessarily need it. I mean, it's nice to, kind of to have it with you, but I think it's just more of a comfort thing when everybody else is doing it.
Yeah, I mean, it's always been a fit-in kind
Yeah.
of thing.
Yeah, at least, to have, like I said, I had that mug when I was outside just because everybody else had something in their hand. Yeah.
But with the research around the health concerns, I mean, that should be making people question whether or not they really want to do this.
I think that I just don't think people are aware about it.
Well, no, they're not.
Yeah, and the education piece I think is really important when it comes to that, especially as a woman, being aware with the breast cancer risks. Like
Yeah.
I remember you had told me that a couple years ago, and it just kind of was like, okay, everything
whatever.
causes cancer.
Yeah.
But just lately, I feel like there's been a little bit more of a campaigning, a little bit more vocal, people being more vocal about it. And I've been hearing it on the news and reading about it and all over the place. And I didn't realize how high the correlation was. And that actually scares me a little bit, to be honest.
Well,
Yeah.
and I think it should.
Yeah.
And so, the people who promote alcohol responsibility have been trying to get industry to look at putting cancer warnings on alcohol containers, and they've been fighting it like crazy.
Yeah, I heard
They
that.
also fight standard drink measurements in bottles.
Yeah. I don't
And-
think people know what the standard drink is either.
Well, no, like it's 5
Yeah.
ounces of wine.
Yeah.
So, and for a woman, current Canadian low-risk drinking guidelines say no more than 2 of those a day, and 2 days a week with no drinking. I mean, it sounds like you were under that, typically.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I don't think I ever measured my wine.
Well, and people don't. So
No.
often they're having what they think is 2 drinks, but it's actually maybe 3, maybe even 4, depending on how.
Well, and with liquor too, like for me, usually, I mean, my husband, he likes beer and kind of the craft beer and whatnot. And I mean, I couldn't even tell you what the standard drink is for that, but you know, even liquor, I know it's 1.5 fluid ounces, but again, I mean, it's not very often where you're taking a shot glass to pour it either.
Well, no,
Yeah.
and you probably should.
Yeah, you probably should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, no, I really appreciate you
Yeah.
coming on, and I really appreciate you doing this, and
Yeah.
I hope it's a valuable experience for you. Rod, can you hear us, and do you have any questions?
No, man, you're a fantastic interviewer, Rand. I want to say congratulations to her for trying it. It's something. And I'm just listening to her story. Sounds like all of our stories. Like the biggest thing is the fear of what people think. You know, is something that you should never have to worry about for whatever reason. We all worry about it. So good for you, Laura, for doing it and showing people that it's possible.
Thanks. Yeah. It's funny, as a 38-year-old woman, you'd think I'd be past that, but I mean that. The thought of wondering what other people
Well, yeah,
think.
like that,
Just
and
because it's
that's-
so social, right?
Yeah.
It's just,
And like I'm way past worrying about what anybody thinks about anything, really. But I think that's something that's really worth looking at and talking about.
absolutely, yeah.
Because that's what you said to me a couple of weeks ago when
Yeah.
I checked in on you. Like I'm afraid to tell people.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, and like I said, it was never of a matter of I don't think I can do it. I think it's
No.
just more about the conversations that surrounding it as to why, or because maybe when people think if you go dry, whether it's in February or I've heard of Sober October or
Yeah.
whatever that might be, it's, well, you must have a problem then.
Yeah,
There
well,
must be something wrong.
I was just going to say that. Like people think if you don't drink, there's something the matter.
Right. Like I can't handle it.
Yeah, you can't handle it, or you've got a dependency on it, or whatever. But no, it's interesting. So I really appreciate you doing this. So thank you.
I appreciate you for asking me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
There we go.
There's something for everyone at the Mad Greek Eatery. Delicious Greek dishes, pizza, lasagna, pastas, soups, salads, and much more. The Mad Greek Eatery brings the best authentic Greek cuisine right to you. Available for licensed dining, events, delivery, and takeout. For the best taste and huge portions, there is only one place. Visit the Mad Greek Eatery, downtown Moose Jaw. Call for takeout and delivery today.
When I first walked through the doors of Edgewood, I had no idea how amazing my life was about to become. The caring and compassionate medical and clinical experts were there for me and for my family every step of the way. The holistic approach the team delivers is highly effective and addresses the needs of each individual. Edgewood saved my life, and it can save yours too. Visit edgewood.ca to learn how you can thrive in your own recovery.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Recovery Hour, proudly brought to you by EHN Canada and SGI. And coming up, as I say, celebrity coach to the stars, Bob Marrier. I wanted to mention something, Rand, with the interview with Laura there. And again, great job with the interview and great job by her. You asked about my Super Bowl thing, and I wanted to ask you something, because you've been sober for so long. Do you remember have you passed 50 years, by the way? Did you hit 50?
No, next month.
Okay. So going into Los Angeles to the Super Bowl party that I was going to Thursday, I think I told you it was $500 to get in, all the cigars and scotch you could consume. Didn't mean anything for me.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I didn't go there worried about any of that. The party ran from 7 to 11. By 8:30, I was ready to go. And I had my ride pick me up, and that was all good.
Yeah.
But in the past, I'd have been, do you remember this feeling? I'd have been the guy going to the party worried ahead of it, when I was still drinking, about what would happen and how I would act. And I'm pretty sure how I would know it would end. I would have been carried out. Do you remember that pit in your feeling?
Well,
that pit in your stomach feeling?
I remember pretty distinctly starting to understand that once I started, I really had no idea of what the heck was going to happen. And some of that was almost exciting, and lots of it was scary, because you really don't know. Because when you lose control of consumption, there's so many changes that go on with your brain that you can't predict or anticipate what you're going to do. And I was the kind of person that would have fairly frequent memory blackouts where, there'd be periods of time when I wouldn't remember where I was, what I said, what I did. And that's scary too. When you realize, did I drive? Did I get in a fight? Did I say something to somebody? Those kinds of experiences are really uncomfortable. But yet we continue, even though that's how that happened last time and the time before and the time before. The pleasure piece of those first 2 or 3 drinks is so attractive, and then the control disappears. But it's that anticipation of that feeling that starts, I think, that keeps people going back, even though there's been all of these bad experiences.
Sure. And people would say, why do you keep doing it? And I would say that is the disease, which you and I know.
Yeah.
As does our next guest. We got to get him on. He's a busy guy. It's late on the East Coast. He's joining us from Miami. And before we bring on Bob Marrier, here is a clip from the Vice TV network on Bob. For those that don't know what a sober coach does or an interventionist, let's have a look at the career of Bob Marrier.
I want you to take a shower when it's minus 30 outside, and I want you to open all the windows in your apartment, and I want you to get out of the ice-cold shower and go lie in the middle of your hardwood floor naked and try and stay warm while you cry. That's what it's like to be me every day. You know what's good about being in recovery? If you're good at it, you stop really giving a what other people think about you.
Hey, Bob.
There you go. So out of that 22-minute feature, which I've watched dozens of times, that's probably the quintessential Bob Marrier right there. Bonsoir, Bob. Comment ça va?
Ça va bien, merci. On va parler en français. I didn't know it was a French thing. It's weird because I can't
I don't know
see
what
you
either
guys.
of you are talking about. I spent
Small.
grade 12 French standing in the hall. So.
Did you? It's standing
I
in the
understand.
hall. It's interesting. That was my education
least-
piece because they didn't know what ADHD was when you're born in 1965. They said in French, c'est un manque de comportement, which was a behavioral issue. But my favorite color is shiny, so I never had a chance. So good evening, guys. It's good to be here. I do call Rand the Governor General of recovery in Canada. So I at any point in time when I was asked. I think it was Nora, is that who reached out to me? I said, there's not much I wouldn't do for Rand, including bury a body. So, that's
we
why I'm
haven't
here.
got there yet.
Yeah. Listen,
No.
I got one question, the big one.
Yeah.
And then I'll turn it loose to you two, because you two have known each other longer than me, than I've been part of this. But Bob, the question, the theme of the show is interventions. When do you know it's time? Because you hear it from families all the time. How would you answer that?
And I'd answer it in, first of all, the pandemic. Addiction's the disease of isolation. The pandemic has made it. It's put my business and my work on steroids. I have my sister staying with me in South Florida right now. I've done 13 interventions since December 24th, which is way too many. And what the intervention is, when families come together, and again, my family, I come from a really good, stable household, and I'm the baby of 6 kids. And for years, my family couldn't get an accord going to, like, he needs help. And my mom, God bless her, was always my protector. She enabled me to continue doing what I was doing. Oh, Mom, I promise this time's going to be different. And ultimately, or culminating, if you will, in I'd moved to California. I was working in the movie business. I was working as a handler. I was taking care of people on different productions. I worked at Paramount, and taking people, they come into town. They were a guest star. I handled pretty well everything. But what happened in my case was finally, as an event of what had happened, I don't go into lower details. I had an accident. It was drug related, and I ended up in a hospital. And when I woke up out of that hospital, the first words out of my mouth was, this could happen to anybody. So the denial was still there. But they managed to send me to a detox after this. And I detoxed. No one brought up what recovery was. It was a medical detox. I was physically addicted. At that point, I was taking opiates and heroin and cocaine and drinking regularly. Every day. I hadn't it had probably been more than a dozen years that I'd gone a day without a drink. And yet, my family, because of their sort of ignorance, would say that, well, Bob wasn't that bad a drinker. But fast forward to the intervention piece. This time, after, I'm talking from age 18, some of the members of my family would start rumbling. And now I'm 38, and I'm a month away from my 39th birthday. I spend time in a detox, in a hospital at a detox, and then they fly me back to Canada under the guise that I had to go see a neurologist there. And I was like sort of out of it. I had definitely detoxed. I wasn't feeling great. And I flew back to Montreal with 2 of my brothers in tow. I woke up, I'll never forget, I arrived late at night, and my poor mom, rest her soul, like, she's in her 70s, and she met me at the door. It was cold. It was winter. And as I just came over 18 years on January 3rd, but it was the end of, it was just at the end of the month, the 30th of January, I believe is the exact day. I woke up the next morning, and my mom was crying, and she met me at the door. Thank God you're home. And I said, Ma, it's no big deal. Don't worry. But I'd hurt myself. I'd fractured my skull when I fell during, my drug-induced state. And the next morning they had an interventionist there, and my mom was nowhere to be found. And I think of the body of work I have today and how often I draw on my own intervention, because, man, did I go around in circles with them. And my family loved me enough to bring someone in, and that man knew enough about telling my family what has been going on and how the family dynamic, addiction is a complicated biochemical problem driven by your family dynamics, the number one thing, your community and your exposure. That's the American Medical Association term. But in this case, that event, that intervention, they had come together. There was no more splitting of my family, and my mom was no longer there for me to triangulate on. I didn't even know what these words meant, but it's what I did. I was an expert at triangulating. Ma, don't let them do this to me. This time's different. And I would escape, the noose would come off. And it was getting more lurid. It was getting more dangerous. And, it was really interesting how hard I was fighting to stay in a lifestyle that was killing me. And I went to treatment. That intervention started at 8 a.m. I showed up at treatment at 5 p.m. There was a lot of arguing, a lot of deal making, none of which went my way. And I went into treatment. And when I went into treatment there, I finally sat down long enough and took a long, hard look on myself, and that happened. But the intervention, guys, without it, I'm dead for sure. And when I do my job today, I often tell people, families will tell me, well, we've had an intervention. Really, this Johnson model intervention? How did you do this? Well, we just started talking about it. It turned into a fight and off he went, which is really what happens if you're not ready to do what needs to be done. And if this event is properly staged, and it is an event, you bring your people together. Hopefully, if you've hired a proper intervention who's properly trained, he will have told the families what to expect, what our rules are in here, and the specific rules, and what we're not going to do. And we're not going to turn it into an argument. We're not going to turn it into a he says, she says. This isn't about yelling at someone or condemnation. This is driven by love and concern. And if you do this properly, it works, and it works highly efficiently. And the people don't feel, how often I can think of the last 6 years, and I think it's a direct link of the TV show Intervention making it such a well-known thing. I never hear, "Oh, you're ambushing me." I don't hear that anymore. They know what is happening the moment that room is set up right. And I don't sit in that circle. The family or the people that are there are who are driving that intervention. They just need coaching to get through that. And again, properly done, it's so powerful. And I'm amazed sometimes at how quickly it can work. And I've gotten, I've been doing this for a while. You guys know that. So I always have someone sitting with me. There's always a second chair. If I'm working a female case, guarantee it, there has to be a female working that case with me. You guys, some of the people that have worked with me clearly. But I've been very collaborative in learning, teaching a skill. I work for Earl Hightower. I'm one of the trainers for him. And I come in and I do my job and I show people how this is done. And, Rod, you've called me in the past. So have you, Rand, and asked me, what do you think we should do here? And the strategizing of what needs to be done. And ultimately, getting people the help they need is what a good intervention is. And it's not, it shouldn't be a fight. It shouldn't turn into any of those things. I don't think, I've done this over 700 times now. I don't think I've ever raised my voice at someone in the process of doing my job. It just doesn't come up. People are yelling at you and you can defuse the situation. But families are asking themselves, when do we do the intervention? Your person is struggling. Rod, you talked about going into that party in LA and saying that orchestra that was going on. How about the fact that whenever we drank, even though we started off a good time, just going to have 2. It's Tuesday. I'm going to have 2. Like, all bets were off. I don't know where I'm ending up. I'm missing a sock. It's Thursday. I'm eating, medication that my friend gave me out of my wet pant pocket. This is good for me. It's rinse, wash, repeat. It was so circular how I lived my life. I'd have varying degrees of jackpots and I'd start to get it going, and my loved ones would see, I would be able to split them even when I was starting to do something good. They said it was different this time. Ultimately, all roads led to, incomprehensible demoralization, what is in the big book, but it led to the same place for me. I always ended up with another jackpot. And I don't know how my mom and dad put up with it in hindsight. They did I came in once. I got lucky enough that it worked. I went to some really good treatment. I stayed in the sober living here in South Florida. People ask me, what's the affinity for Miami? I ended up getting sober here in South Beach. I lived at a sober living here for 4 months, and my life sort of really took off here. And prior to that, I had really low grade depression since I was a teenager. And, I'd go tell therapists 30% of the truth and 70% of my bullshit narrative. I'm not supposed to swear, I just did. But, a good intervention brought me in. And I thank that today. It had to happen. And I think of how much love and concern my family had for me, even though I burned each and every one of them. There was a lot of healing to do. My sister who's visiting me now, when I took my 10-year cake, 10 years, guys, she stood up in that room and said, "I finally forgive you," which is pretty powerful. And, I couldn't get mad at that. It took the time that it took, and it took the living amends for me to get there. But if not for an intervention, there was no way I was going to go, and I wouldn't have seen my 40th birthday. My 39th birthday was in rehab, and I wouldn't have seen 40. So the intervention is the most important thing that I think happens. And then it's important that a good interventionist is going to single out a good treatment center. I really like certain things about certain places, and I will use them over and over again. And I want my people to have their best opportunity of, we talk about this kick at the can being the kick at the can. I'd say a half of the interventions I do are on people who are recidivists who have been to treatment before. They're harder cases. I get called in sometimes after another interventionist hasn't been able to close. I can close. I'm good at it. To give you, any the amount of learning I've had to do with this craft since when I came in to where I'm at today is pretty staggering, and I continue to be a student of the game. I really enjoy helping others learn this, and I'm really collaborative. I got a call the other day from a guy that was in it, and he's like, "Oh boy, what are we going to do?" And he was an American working in Toronto, and I said, "Okay, well, here's what we're going to do. This is a playbook." And he called me later on, and it worked, and he was appreciative. But this is the pandemic couldn't have been a better storm for exposing. I'm from Quebec. The amount of troubles there are there and the lack of places to get people help are staggering. It's nuts. And treatment centers in Quebec have been forced or mandated by the provincial government that there has to be one bed and one bathroom per bed. So a lot of treatment centers are working at 25% of capacity when they should be running at 150% of capacity. And there are waiting lists and waiting lines. And I brought someone to a ground level detox during the Christmas holidays. I mean, this person met the criteria and everything. And then private detoxes were telling me, "Hey, can you come back on January 9th? It was the 23rd. It's like, okay, I'll try and make my way back here, but I don't know when I can. Anyway, I'm talking enough, guys. Ask me some more questions. I hope I've answered properly.
So we've got a question that came in. There's always been thinking that people have to be ready to go to treatment. Intervention changes that quickly. And do you track outcomes?
I tend to believe, first of all, I had this call yesterday when a person asked me, "Oh, what are the outcomes of this treatment center?" And I said, anyone that's advertising an outcome, run away from them, because there's absolutely no way. I track my outcomes in two ways. I stay in touch with pretty well everyone I intervene on. It's really remarkable at Christmas time how many cards I get. And I try and, check in on people. It's, some of you come to my meeting. I run a meeting on Zoom now on Tuesdays and Thursday nights. And because of my friends that I have all over the place, I'm bringing speakers in from all over the place. But sometimes I'll sit there and my brother came into recovery during the pandemic. And even he says, "Man, you got a pretty good body of work here." People drop in from all over the place. So it's I've tracked every intervention I've done. And I can tell you out of the 717, because yesterday I worked, only 4 people haven't been to treatment. Now, there's a caveat to this, because people say, "Really, that many people? That's fantastic." I get them to treatment. What happens in treatment, and now part of the job as the interventionist now is case management. We all manage the cases that go in. So the moment I've done an intervention, this switches over to someone else in my company that manages the case while it's in treatment. People used to say, "Here's my problem." You'd hear the family exhale, and Junior would go to rehab, and we wouldn't hear anything. And then, like the Easy Bake Oven, 6 weeks are up. Ding! Oh, he did really well. We graduated him, and away he goes. And that's not how it works anymore. If you have a proper case manager, you're going to know what's going on the whole time. You're going to have a release sign, so the release of information, and we can start healing as a family and as a group. Sometimes it has to be limited in release because we don't want to tell them all the badness, but we can start building the out track from the day they arrive. Now, I'm not a clinician, nor is my company. We follow the clinical recommendations of treatment centers. I'd say 95% of treatment centers tell people, do 90 meetings in 90 days. How many people actually do 90 meetings in 90 days that aren't being followed up? Not many. It's a tough task. But that follow through, and like families used to say, "Well, our problem has gone to rehab," when really the family dynamic piece is bigger than ever. This is a family illness. If one of you is suffering, believe me, the rest of you are feeling it in different forms of trauma. If it's young people and it's a parent and there's insecurity and fear and madness, and then later on, when they say kids are resilient, and Rand, you know this, how many grown men, much like me, do I work with that have massive childhood abandonment issues or trauma from childhood, and they have ostensibly lived their lives by either being hyper focused or very driven.
Yeah.
And when the breaks start, I'm dealing with all these retired guys, alpha males, golden parachute, and all of a sudden they're coming apart at the seams emotionally, and they don't know why. They've no idea. Well, I can tell you, because in grade 3, when that happened to you, it bothered you, or when this happened,
And you've avoided
all
looking
these,
at it for 50
yeah,
years because
yeah,
you were drinking or
and
whatever. So what about
yeah,
the being ready piece?
the ready piece to me is simple. I believe they're ready the day I show up, and I tell the family, if you want to if they can keep digging, like, when's it enough? I'm amazed at young people in recovery that actually bite into the apple and stay at it, because I mean, when I went to rehab, I was 38. My 39th birthday was in rehab. I felt like, how do they know so much about me? I'm a garden variety addict. There's nothing. I'm not a unicorn anymore, and I could have come in when I was younger, because I pretty well checked every box. When someone's ready is if a family's wanting to love them and say, "Hey, this is enough." You can see the writing on the wall. Sometimes we look at the family tree with that genogram and say, I have some adult children of alcoholics who don't have any problems themselves, but they see their kids starting to suffer, and maybe in university years, and they start realizing, hey, my mom was an alcoholic, and I'm pretty sure my kids got it. And maybe we should do something now before it gets way out of control. There's a lot of that now. There's a lot more education. We used to live in shame. In the 18 years I've been in, man, it's so much more acceptable to be in recovery, and so much more that we do that. So to answer that question is, I think it's ready when, if a concerted effort is put in, you can get them to go now. Or do you need to wait till something more happens? I had a case at Christmas, just after the new year, and there were two DUI, young father, 2 kids, 2 DUIs in a 6-week period. And half his family saying, oh, it could happen to anybody, the same type of lingo I was giving. And I said, oh, he's got 2 DUIs. And the second DUI was at 11 in the morning, and has 2 kids in the car. He's ready. And their family, like the mother, was kind of in denial about it. And I said, look, if you keep on doing this, we're going to have problems. And ultimately, that we got this case done, and we got this person into treatment. So often you can see that what we talked about, like, the family's got their part to play in this. Oh, is he ready enough? It's not like it's not an easy bake oven. If you can see the writing on the wall, maybe you can stop bad things from happening. So I would tend to believe you're ready if you can see it. I do sometimes do that preliminary call, and they start describing to me, and I'm saying, hey, listen, maybe this isn't as severe as you think it is. It doesn't happen often, but it does. But if you're thinking it's bad enough and you're already speaking to someone, the odds are it's ready to go now. You don't have to put them back in the game. And Rand, you've been doing this long enough when people probably say to you, which I've already heard, man, we should have listened to you 2 years ago when you told us the unvarnished truth. And we thought,
And often
when we
people,
take
like, when you do an intervention, usually there's an active addiction going on, and that
yeah,
person really doesn't have capacity to accurately assess what's going on with them, because all they want is for everybody to shut up and then get their next drink or drug. When you get them into treatment and separate them from the drug, then their brain starts to clear. And I think the readiness often happens when that realization of, good grief,
mhm,
I got to change some stuff. So there's another
yeah,
question about, and I think you touched on it, and I think it's an important change that's gone on, is that whole aftercare piece, recovery coaches, sober living
mm,
houses, those kinds of things. I think have been a huge addition to the
yeah.
continuum of care piece. So, what are your feelings around and thinking around recovery care coaching? Recovery coaches, what kind of training do they need? Do they need
Mm.
certification? What are your thoughts around that?
Um, First question is you know, the continuum of care is everything. In a perfect world, I think it's kind of galling, 38 years old, and I'm going to send him to treatment for 6 weeks, and that'll be the end of it. I'm like, it took 38 years to get here. So, you know, you got Rand, you're coming up on 50 years. People must say, like, you still go to those meetings? You can drink light beer, right? I'm like, it's 2022, and I still get questions like that. I am 100% for the longer the care, the better. If in some cases they can't do it, if you've got a young father or a young mother and she's got to get back in there, but there's an outpatient clinic most major cities have what they call an IOP, intensive outpatient, that's 2 or 3 days a week, sometimes 5, depends on what we're getting. There's almost an a la carte menu, and a continued addictions therapist involved in their lives, as well as a fellowship and learning. There are people that do it on their own. There's many pathways to recovery, but I see it best working when the opposite of addiction is connection, and that connection is so important to me. I don't think I have the friendships I have today in recovery, including you two gentlemen, are amazing. And I can run into you guys like Rand and Rod for that matter. Like, I want you to think of how close we are without seeing each other daily, and how we don't have any problems. We can sit down at a table. That to me was so important. I'm a baby of 6 kids, big, happy, loving family. But I never felt more enveloped in the recovery and the fellowship as it did. And it really pulled me through. It still does today. I live maybe a kilometer from the store. They have a clubhouse here on South Beach that has meetings pretty well all day from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. And that piece to me was huge. When I came in, I was like the first days of outpatient. I left the rehab center I went to. They threw me out at 42 days because I wouldn't take a job, a humility job at Dunkin' Donuts. But I came to Miami and did an intensive outpatient clinic and lived in a sober house. And I look at what it did for me. I'd say 4 months into that ride, I'll never forget it, because I was driving my bicycle. I didn't have anything, and it was raining and sunny at the same time, as can happen here. And I was overwashed with this. You start feeling things. Hey, people, by the way, when you quit drinking, you're going to start feeling all those emotions. But it was one of like all of a sudden, the smell of the grass, I was overwhelmed, and I was like, what the hell's happening to me? Like, oh, wait, I haven't been happy since I'm a child. This is what I'm feeling right now. And it was like, yeah, I'm signed up. When people ask me, when did you know? Like, did it become hard? I was 5 months in, and I knew I was, the obsession was lifted. I just saw things in a different light. And that would not have happened if I had been, oh, you went 42 days, you did your best. I could have come home and driven my, excuse my language, my bullshit narrative some more with the people close to me. Ma, wasn't really for me. Those people are way worse than I am. And that narrative starts, as opposed to being, I have an issue and I need to be responsible for it. And I need to be responsible to you guys that I do my part in this. When you can teach the family that this is all going to happen and this has to happen, there's a lot of hope in the mix then. And I think that that's real important to people to understand. Don't be lone wolfing it. I went to treatment. They told me I was okay. I got a call this morning, and yesterday's day, my sister's here. I did an intervention via Zoom. I woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning with a mother telling me that a guy that I had worked with 8 years ago had attempted suicide a couple of days ago, and she didn't know what to do. And all of this was going on, and this was happening before lunch. And it's a nonstop. Recovery is nonstop to me. I'm going to continue to recover. I'm going to continue to try and get better at being me. And I do it in a community that I feel very at home in, and welcome in. Not every meeting is the same that I like. I go to some meetings and it's not for me. But the stuff that I like and the people that I gravitate towards, I'm forever grateful. And it's really interesting that I have a brother now that, my older brother has got 18 months, and he comes to me like I'm the old timer, and I kind of laugh. I'm like, don't worry. And he's doing everything right. He's got a sponsor. He's doing everything he needs to do. And I'm proud of him. I tell him that all the time. I said, that's crazy. And he's like living all these moments I had, like, man, how much money was I spending? And wow, what was I doing? Like, how could I think I was anesthetized and having fun? Because the joy had been out of Mudville for years for me when I was drinking and using. The sadness needed to be dealt with, and it was a lot better living on this side of it. And I can tell you that it's amazing to see families recover as a unit. The intervention I did yesterday, I'm going to stop talking after this. The intervention yesterday, guys, was a culmination. I got hired in July of 2019. Intervention on a young heroin addict in Montreal. It took 6 days. We went to his place and he ran off, and a very codependent mother had to be babysat because she wanted to love him to death, and the father had his own issues. The father, a year ago on January 9th, went into treatment in Comox at Nomina. They were the only place that would take him. He weighs 380 pounds, and he was on 350 milligrams of methadone a day, a toxic dose. He has lost 150 pounds. His son is doing fine after multiple treatments, but it took him a while to get started, but we got him going. And the daughter had gone to an intensive program in Tennessee at Onsite. And finally, the mom, during the pandemic, the second round in Quebec, she really started to decompensate. And yesterday morning, I got on a call with the three of them, and I was like, it's like a family affair. And I said, let's get her on the phone. And I was able to convince her to check into Chatsworth, which she did yesterday afternoon. So we do recover, and I can look at a family that got better. My mother went from being a hopeless codependent to a very strong Al-Anon member, and very much learned her role in keeping me sick, or loving me to death, as it were. And we started to recover as a family. We really did, in my house. It's interesting. I was like the black sheep, and Bob had no responsibilities. Now I'm like the youngest one with all the responsibilities, but I love the role I get to play today. And I like where I came from, but I remember where I came from, rather, but really like where I'm going. And that wouldn't have happened without this recovery. And you guys know you say that. Go ahead.
One of the things that we deal with here is wait times. So, I mean, I get calls for, intervention help, what do we do kinds of things. And, I mean, one of my first questions is, can we look at out-of-province private treatment? And very, very often the answer is, no, there's no money, which is, it happens in lots and lots of cases. And so there's a 3-month wait to get into treatment, and often a week to 3 weeks to get into detox. What do you do in situations like that?
I'd say that 95% of my clientele can afford private help, but that's seriously. Here, let me tell you a little secret. I don't leave anyone on the side of the road. I never have. I had a kid last year that I spent over $60,000 of my money to keep him into treatment. And when the family found out that I had helped him because he was 19, they realized, because they thought it was a lost cause and stuff, and it wasn't, and he's doing fine. But I work with a place in South Carolina called, I'm drawing what is wrong with me? I'm drawing a full blank. I'm having a senior moment. I'm telling Rod that. The Oaks Recovery Center in South Carolina. And for $3,500, these people will take you for 4 months. And I don't think I can feed someone for 4 months for $3,500. But there's a caveat here too. They don't detox people. So you need to get detoxed. And I think the bigger problem, most of the most lurid cases for me are young people that are addicted to opiates or addicted to, benzos, and they need a real detox. And look, this year at Christmas, I deal with a couple of private places in Toronto. The 2 private places in Montreal were telling me like January, and this was Christmas time. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. The hospital is putting Band-Aids on gunshot wounds. You go to the hospital and they'll go, well, we'll give you benzos for today and just try and ride it out. And maybe you have a friend that can give you dose 2 tomorrow. And that's as good as it gets right now. So what I try and do is try and line them up with some sort of help. But detox is the expensive piece it's not the longest piece, but it's expensive. There are ways around treatment that is inexpensive. That Oaks place is a nonprofit. The clothing I sell, I Hired Sobriety clothing, I give scholarships for. And last year I put 6 people into the Oaks from the money that I earned from selling just little t-shirts and stuff. And I'm able to get really good results there. But make no mistake, that's for a certain clientele. That's the young guy who's got something. I can't send someone there who's got a dual diagnosis that's heavy, on mental health or something like that. That's not necessarily going to work there. But there are places in Canada too, but it's almost shameful. And Rand, as well as I do, when's the best time to help someone? The day he asks for help.
Yeah.
To be able to tell them, and in Canada, the system works this way. Mom and dad can't call the treatment thing in Quebec and in Ontario. You have to make the calls. So the sickest person in the equation is meant to do the calling and all the stuff. And really and truly, and then they call. How many addicts answer unknown callers, or even if they have a phone, they don't answer the phone number? And in Quebec, you go to the bottom of the pile. They don't even give you a chance to call back.
Well, yeah, it's the
You've
same
missed
thing
the
here.
one
Like
call.
you have to call
Yeah,
every day at before
yeah,
noon to
yeah,
one of the detoxes for 2 or 3
yeah.
weeks,
So
and then if you miss a day, you bump back down to the bottom. And so,
yeah,
that's really frustrating for families. So,
yeah.
there's
And
pre-treatment case management that we end up trying to do, and trying to get
triage
people,
with
yeah,
no money.
yeah, trying to get
Yeah,
people, maybe start going to meetings. Here's some uh, uh, personal tools you can use to maybe manage your anxiety. Let's try some harm reduction stuff. So
yeah,
in those kinds of cases, it's much more complicated. But you still, if the desire is there to change,
yeah.
then you
Now, some
can,
people will go through. They'll go through hell or high water.
yeah,
The ones that, and those ones that make it. We're both friends with the chef at Chatsworth, Dave,
yeah,
who came to me. He used to make me food at this corner diner where I lived, and he came up to me once. Are you the guy that gets people sober? And I went, I can help you, but you're going to need to do the work yourself. He
yeah.
always says that. He just passed 8 years, and he's now, he's the head chef. More than that, he operates in that place. But I look at the person he was, the hoops that man had to jump through to get into this recovery because he needed detox, he needed everything. And on Christmas Eve, I drove him to Kingston, where his friend came to pick him up, and drove him all the way to Toronto, where he had a detox bed in some shelter. Subacute detox. I want to say subacute to people listening. What does that mean? It means a detox that can be happening for either alcohol or drug use with a nominal amount of medication, and providing there are no big medical issues, which even the biggest rehabs in Canada, if something really bad starts to happen and they're being treated by a doctor, there's not a rehab in Canada that keeps that person there. You go straight to the hospital. So subacute is pretty well what all the detoxes look like. But if we can do that, and I can't believe in a country like Canada where we now have a minister in charge of mental health and addiction, we should be looking at triage stations that can do this on a much easier and a larger scale, and be able to help them the moment they want it. And there's
I
going to be
think I,
people listening,
I
like,
I think there's still
yeah,
some huge systemic stigma around addiction that
yeah,
people
well,
should just smarten up.
yeah,
And
like,
there's a lack of fairly high level understanding that uh, that if you could, you would. And
yeah. And I go to the stigma though. Think of 18 years ago. First of all, how ashamed I was walking into a room. Little did I know that more than half the people in there would already know my name. It was like an inverted Cheers episode. But I remember thinking today, I used to walk into an AA meeting and say I'm an alcoholic addict, and old timers would yell at me. That doesn't happen anymore. But I remember thinking, thank God my parents had the wherewithal. I had some insurance when this happened in the United States, and my parents paid for treatment. And they put up the money. I'd been working for years. I couldn't write you a check for $50. I had money, but I spent everything I made, and it was again. I had an opportunity that I realized how lucky I was. But I've dealt with some people and they're desperate, and I sometimes can call a place and say, hey, can we help this person or stuff like that. And the ones that make it to South Carolina, who have to detox, and sometimes have to detox it at home, some of the stuff, and then they have to be clear, and they're unbelievable how well they do, because they go there on their own accord. It wasn't handed to them. And I think it's saying that some of the hardest cases make it out of the roughest places. And I've had other ones have an easy time going in there, have no, you don't understand how grateful you should be, even though you're staying in a very luxurious place and you're being well taken care of. They don't have an ounce of that humility yet. And sometimes the humility comes from hitting rock bottom. And that's what I think someone was asking, when do you know if they're at rock bottom? When they stop digging and when they're desperate. The gift of desperation is pretty magical. It really is.
I've got a comment up here. It says the words "you cannot treat anxiety and depression with any active substance use" was so true. For me, it was marijuana.
Yeah.
When a guy's using, your mind's not clear. And
No.
I think
No,
that's
and
a huge advantage of detox and treatment, is you get
Yeah.
to start to feel stuff, and lots of people don't like
Yeah.
that. they, like
No.
it's really
But
uncomfortable because you haven't felt
especially
it
like
forever.
I have acute anxiety is something that is awful. It's uncomfortable. And to be given, if you're really coming unglued. The last time I had a massive anxiety attack is after I was coming out of a surgery for my Achilles tendon, and like it was terrifying. I felt like I was under the ice, and they gave me a benzodiazepine, and it was gone in 10 minutes. I don't like taking anything today. I don't like taking Tylenol. I have this really weird. Oh, it's just a headache. It's not that bad. It's hurting me, but okay, at the very last minute. But you can't treat anxiety. And listen, if you're in a good place and someone's there holding your hand, saying you're going to be okay, we're going to get through this. I think it's important that there is help for you. And I just, the worst part to me is having to tell people like there's nothing I can do. The woman that called me yesterday morning, I must have made 10 calls today to try and see what I can get. But there's no one's open after Christmas. This is the busiest time of year in the treatment business. So he's getting the
Rod
opportunity
and I
of
have the
either
same
going
issues.
to work. Yeah. It's really, I hope to, where I've come, and when I look at having like it's being able to get a drop-in center that looks like something that we can make it more potable, and maybe doing that. And I talk about that the way I used to talk about getting sober when I was in active addiction, and it kind of bothers me. I went to a recovery conference in America in September during Recovery Month last year in Las Vegas. And some of the programs that are coming out, the Phoenix, which came out of Boston, and they're all over. And it's basically a gym for people that are in recovery. And there's so much more going on. And they have, young addiction therapists. They're
Bob,
starting out and see them.
we got about a
that
minute
stuff.
left. So, Rod, do you want to say anything or?
No, my biggest issue now is that we have 1 minute left. So we got to wrap it up. Obviously we could go on all night, Bob.
Yeah.
I want to say that I appreciate you, obviously, and this has been fantastic. And we'll have to dig into more of this another time because I feel like we just kind of scratched the
I hope I
surface.
did. I think now my anxiety is coming in. Oh, I think I talk too much.
I'll send you a meditation to help you decompress.
I am going
take
to
a
sleep
breath.
like a baby tonight. I'm going to put my head to the pillow, and I'll be
Okay.
asleep very quickly tonight, with absolutely no doubt. I've had a good long.
You're
hard
the
few
guest.
days, and just yeah. Well, I'll leave you with this. Tomorrow, I'm at an event in Boca Raton for recovery. That for Brandon Novak's house is his nonprofit Sober Livings, and then Friday morning I fly to Montreal. I work on Friday afternoon, and I'm flying out private, hopefully Friday night, to Los Angeles.
Be
It's a good
careful.
week.
Buckle
Good luck.
up.
Bon
Thanks.
chance. Bon chance.
Good to see you.
Bonne chance. Bye, gentlemen. Have a great night. Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
me.
Take care.
All the best.
At least he knew what I was saying.
Yeah.
Rand, we are out of time. We'll take our last commercial break going out of the show. The next show, maybe we can talk about the distinction between the arc of recovery,
Sure.
recovery itself, addiction itself, define the roles of everything that we've talked about here today, because we were kind
Great
of
idea.
all over the place.
Yeah.
But I appreciate Laura coming in, and I don't have anything else to say. Do you?
I'm just happy to be here.
Happy to be anywhere. All right. Good to see
So
you,
we'll
Rand. Thank
see
you so much.
everybody next month. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for watching the Recovery Hour on Facebook Live and YouTube Live.